Hey guys, welcome to this video. So as you can tell by the title, I got a 9 in 2023 English Literature GCSE and I also got 100% on paper 2. So in this video I'm going to be sharing with you really specific tips because oh my god, it would get on my nerves so much when videos would just be so generic. It'd be like, read the question properly, obviously. So I'm going to share the essay structures that helped me write essays that got full marks as well. Even if you don't do the same books and texts that I do, I think this video will still be really useful because the ideas are the same. It's just that the examples I give might not make as much sense, but definitely still worth listening to the points I want to say. If you can hear background noise, I'm so sorry. I think my mum's making soup downstairs and blending things up. So firstly, just like a generic point. I don't know if it was just teachers at our school, but they absolutely ate it up if you wrote down whilst on first glance and then ... obviously filling it in upon closer inspection. So also I have all my notes on my laptop there, so that's why my eyes might keep drifting that way. Heads up. So yeah, you really want to be trying to write and incorporate alternative interpretations into your work because examiners just love that. It shows greater depth of understanding as well. And this is really useful for if the question is like a student's statement. So you never go, oh, I fully agree, I fully disagree. You always want to add nuance into it, and you can use different interpretations of quotes, of imagery to back up your nuanced argument. Okay, so getting into it, for the 19th century book, I did Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So I'm not sure if it's for this book, but place is so important. Like, setting is such a prominent symbol for the type of events that will occur and the type of people that are present in those settings. It says a lot about them too. You really want to focus on how the audience at the time would respond compared to the audience nowadays and why. So, for example, with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the Victorians placed really great importance on reputation. So when Dr. Jekyll's reputation is tarnished, this is like severe punishment for his actions as well. But obviously nowadays we don't really think that much of like a man of the upper class's reputation. And link your quotes to theories that were present at the time. So with Jekyll and Hyde, there's the radiance of a foul soul, and that links to the theory of criminal atavism, where Victorians believed that criminals had certain identifiable facial features. Also, you really want to hammer home, what is the author trying to teach us? What is the author trying to warn us about as well? To be honest, I think paper 1, the kind of stuff that you write about is quite similar. So Shakespeare, I did Macbeth. With Shakespeare and the book, the best answers always understand that characters shift throughout the text. And it can be a shift towards morality, away from morality, but they have different states throughout the text. And you really want to focus on why do they shift? What causes them to change? Do the characters act like the change is inevitable when it actually isn't, and what does it say about the character? When you're talking about the extract, I think it really helps if you situate yourself. So if you say where that extract is that in the middle? Is that in the beginning, the middle, or the end of the text? And give a little bit of context, because you know everything that's happened. So you can talk about what happened before or after the extract that you're given and say why what has happened in the extract is important because of that. Most characters have a foil to them, so in Macbeth it's Macduff Malcolm, and the foils usually help to highlight and emphasise the flaws or the weaknesses of the main characters. If the question that you get is about a theme, so for this example, let's say, how is concealment presented in Macbeth? You want to talk about what is concealed, so what relates to the theme first of all. Who is concealing? So who does the theme affect the most? When or where does it happen in the play? How is it presented through plot and language devices, literary methods? So for example, concealment can be shown through emotional manipulation, but can also be shown through fog and darkness. And then importantly, why is this theme important? I can't think of another word for important. So why is this theme important? And how does it influence the plot and the characters? How big of an impact does it have on the events that happen in the story? Try and use a good range throughout your essay as well. This applies to everything. So if you try to talk about something that happens in the beginning, something that happens in the middle, something that happens at the end, and you can also incorporate how the characters shift throughout as well into your essay and make it really good. In terms of the essay structure, the introduction, we want to give an overall answer to the question, like one really long or 2 sentences that explain what you're going to argue sort of. And in your conclusion, you're basically just summing up your argument and explaining what Shakespeare is trying to teach the audience. So the introduction and the conclusion are all about these big ideas, but then your middle paragraphs are much more critical thinking. After the introduction, I would probably talk about the extract, and you can give a little bit of background information, explain what is going on in the extract summarized in a way. I only did this for the Shakespeare essays, but you can start off your paragraphs basically just giving some context. I would just talk about what has happened and then explain the quotes with the imagery analysed. But you can also do a topic sentence that leads with an idea. So like Shakespeare shows, demonstrates, reveals, and then relate to the question. And then try and include a little bit of theory or an argument about what Shakespeare is trying to teach us. So pick a quote that's imagery rich and relevant, and then analyse that and explain the literary devices used, like personification, specific verbs used, and why that's important. And explain the comparisons between the literary devices used and what Shakespeare is trying to get at. And if you link this to another part of the play, if you can find another quote that directly parallels or contrasts what you are talking about now, that's really good in terms of writing about how themes and characters shift throughout. So for the play, I did an Inspector Calls, and I don't know if it's just because it's quite a political play, but everything is really intentional. All the characters are there for a reason, not just for you to go, oh, I don't like Mrs. Burling. Why is she dislikable? She's dislikable because Priestley wants us to dislike her and thereby dislike her views and her attitudes. You see what I mean? It's not just like oh, she's kind of annoying. So you need to think critically about why things happen, to whom, what are the lessons that we need to learn from it. Because every character is a symbol of something. Like Eva Smith is a symbol of all the oppressed working class, specifically working class women. She's not just this character in a play that we feel sorry for. Context is so important for the play. So society, what is expected of certain people, and how do these characters conform to the expectations that are placed on them, or how do they maybe go against these expectations, and do their actions change over time in regards to how they act according to society. So you can explain why characters are treated the way they are, like why is Eva's treated the way that she is, because she's working class and because there's this really prominent hierarchical class system in the Edwardian times. And you can relate the character's actions to the context of the time. So Mr. Burling is like that because he's like capitalist factory owner. If you get a question about theme, talk about the contrasting attitudes to the theme as well. So say, for example, you get a question about responsibility. You can talk about how do people take responsibility, or they try and avoid responsibility at all costs. Who takes the responsibility, who doesn't? And what is the lasting impression that we're left with about each character's attitudes to responsibility, and why? Because the most important thing is, what is the writer urging the audience to take from the play as a lesson to be learned, and how do they do this? So within Inspector Calls, the inspector is like the driving force for this. I think he's a proxy. I haven't done English in a year, guys. He's a proxy for Priestley to reflect his ideologies and present them to the audience. Yeah, so think about, how does the writer present their views to the audience? What characters do they use? The writer always uses characters for a reason. So write about which characters change, which stay stagnant, and then what that reveals about Priestley's views. So for example, Priestley makes Sheila a little bit less annoying towards the end because he believes that the younger generation will be the ones to improve society, so we like her more, and that also gets his point across about caring for other people, caring for the working class, which is the belief that Sheila begins to take on. The context of the audience. So with Inspector Calls, because it's a post-war audience, they know not to trust anything that comes out of Mr. Burling's mouth, because the things that he's saying they know are false. You don't need to remember the specific scenes. You can say Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, whatever, but you could just say in the beginning of the play. Or what I like to do is you can say after this event happens, then this, blah, 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 and then carry on to contextualize it. Because I feel like saying, oh, in Act 2, Scene 3, in Act 3, Scene 1, it seems quite rigid compared to if you just say, after it's revealed that this happened, then this, and then you explain the thing that you want to talk about. Always try and talk about symbolism in your answer. So in Inspector Calls, you've got symbolism of the wall, bees in a hive, being members of one body, that kind of thing. Do you learn the information through what is said, like dialogue, or through what's unsaid, like stage directions or body language? That's quite telling as well. And with AO2, you don't have to just talk about quotes. You can analyse the stage directions, you can analyse lighting, costume, dramatic irony, tension, the way characters interact with one another, and how they speak. I think Mr. Burling talks a little bit like colloquial, is it? Eric says squiffy. And in terms of the structure, the introduction and ending are quite similar. You're basically just giving a broad answer to the question. But I think with both, you really want to focus on the importance of the character or the theme in terms of furthering the writer's beliefs. So what is the writer criticising? What is the writer trying to teach the audience, and why? And what do they want to change as a result? So like Priestley wants more people to take more social responsibility. He does this through making Mr. Burling seem like a fool, and Mr. Burling represents the selfish, greedy capitalist factory owners. Just always remember to name the dramatic method. So if you say the room is described as not comfortable, rather than going straight into this reveals that blah, 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 say this setting reveals that, and then you can probably get loads of marks from that alone. Sorry, I think I've gone off topic. So the essay structure, you have your introduction, you have your conclusion, and then your middle paragraphs, 2 really chunky or 3. You want to introduce your topic sentence, your initial point, and you have to make it a concept or an idea, not a plot or method. So, for example, Priestley presents society as blah, blah. He uses the character of blah, blah to criticise or mock blah, blah. Then you want to provide an example of this, give some brief background, and explain how the example that you've used answers the question. And then analyse methods used and language features. But importantly, you always want to refer back to the writer's intent. What is the writer trying to teach us? And also you could refer back to life during the time period that it's set in and how it relates to society, because that will give you some, is it AO3? Context marks. Okay, finally, the poetry section. So I just realised my points are all kind of random, but that means that you should watch the whole thing because you don't want to miss out on anything good. Most importantly, write essay plans for your poetry questions. You can definitely plan for them because there's only so many themes that a poem is kind of based on. Like with love and relationships, you've got the romantic ones, you've got the family ones, and then you've got those random letters from Yorkshire friendship one. So with the family ones, they're not going to be asking you about romantic love. They're going to be asking you about family. So if you do an essay plan that's like, how are relationships between parent and child presented, then even if the essay question is slightly different, it's still got that theme, so you can just change it a little bit. And you also don't have time to think of a response in the exam. Like, you're not going to be getting a grade 9 essay out by just going into the exam with a few quotes memorized. Also, you can't memorize entire poems. You cannot be doing that, because that's such a waste of time, first of all. And you only need a few really good quotes, but because they need to be relevant to a question, that's why I'd also highly recommend writing an essay plan, and then the quotes will come naturally and actually fit into your response, rather than just putting in a few quotes that, yeah, they're good, but they're not really related. Anyway, so that's why I'm going to be selling my love and relationships poetry anthology essay plans online. I'm thinking of selling them on Etsy as PDFs, but I just need to work around the whole can't sell if you're under 18 thing. But I will provide a link to the plans in the comments below, the top pinned comment. Also, the way that I've written the plans, it isn't like full sentences, it's kind of bullet points, because I want to give you the really good ideas that inspire you to write well. You absolutely do not need to write in a certain style, in a certain way, to be getting full marks to. That's the beauty of English, is that there's so many different ways that you can provide a good answer. But on with the rest of the video. So the introduction is about the poem as a whole. What is the central idea? How does it relate to the topic or the theme of the question? You can talk about how the title of the poem relates to the poem's content. I actually remember quite a lot of the poetry. So things like neutral tones. You think it's going to be bland? No. Thomas Hardy is still bitter AF. Or Farmer's Bride. It's been 3 years and she's still called a bride. Why is that interesting? So this is the main point that I want to get across, okay? You can stop watching this video, the poetry, after this, but drill this into your head, okay? So at the start of your paragraph, you want to have a comparison. So the poems both have this, but then you want to talk about how each poem approaches that slightly differently. So I'll include an example on the screen, because that gives your answer so much more depth to it. Also, you can twist the meaning of quotes to fit your argument. One that I remember, so I did love and relationships poetry, is in Mother Any Distance, when she says, pinch the last 100th of an inch, I think. Pinching could be a good thing, like she's stopping her son from floating away, but it could also be a bad thing because she's stopping him from floating away. So whatever you're trying to argue, you can kind of twist the quote's meaning to suit whatever you're trying to argue. Always think about who the poem's point of view is written from and why, and historical context. You can talk about like women's positions. That's quite big in love and relationships. But I'm pretty sure you can get marks for context on sort of giving a little bit of background to the poem, rather than saying Lord Byron was a manhole. So you don't need to be learning these poets' life stories at all. Like, just saying, in Sonnet 29, women were expected to be submissive and docile at the time, but she goes against this. Just fitting that in. Also, literally just use synonyms. Like, my topic sentences, I probably was just using synonyms of basically the same word. You just got to try and be good with synonyms. Also with poetry, punctuation and line structure can be quite significant as well. So if something is written on a separate line, or if there's an end-stopped line, whereas the rest of the poem had enjambment, is that the one where it's like flowing? What is it trying to emphasize? And in the conclusion, you can either rephrase the introduction or talk about how the endings of both poems are different. I quite like doing that one. And write about if the ending on a note of ambiguity or a note of certainty, and why. Unseen poetry. I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember much of unseen poetry from what I can try and tell you, because I feel like unseen poetry, there's so many different approaches you could take and all of them could be right. So write about how is imagery used. Imagery is a big thing in poetry. What is the poet trying to teach and how does the imagery back that up? You can always analyse the title. What does it suggest? and do the contents of the poem fit what the title is suggesting, or why not? Analyze chronologically is something you can do if you're not too sure what to write about. So you can talk about what's happening at the beginning, the middle, the end, and how does the tone shift? Why is it done? And what's the deeper meaning for this? And the conclusion, you can talk about how the poem ends, like ambiguity of finality, and what is the poet trying to teach? What is the life lesson? 8 marker, I've written on my notes, 8 marker is a bit of a joke. So I think if you are running out of time, you need to be focusing on your other essays, because 8 marks is nothing compared to like 34 that you could get on some of your essays. But with the 8 marker, there's just a bigger emphasis on language devices. So you literally could just say as your topic sentence, both poems use natural imagery through metaphors to say this. So I hope that this video was useful. My throat is so dry right now, but I hope that I helped you feel a bit more confident with your English literature exam. Hopefully I helped clarify anything, and if anything doesn't make sense, I don't know, like comment below. That feels so weird to say. Comment below and I'll try and answer it. It has been a year since I did it. But yeah, good luck for your exam and I'm sure that you'll smash it.